did you do that?
It's not my fault, it's your fault. You made me. What you just witnessed was an example of IPV, or intimate partner violence. While I can make light of it, it's a serious topic and certainly nothing to joke about. IPV, or intimate partner violence, also known as domestic violence, is a very taboo subject, but it's something that we should all have a pretty good general understanding of. I was personally impacted by IPV several years ago, which led me on a journey of self-discovery and led me to research more, so that I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of the topic in order to share with you today. So today, I'm going to talk about how to define intimate partners. I'm going to introduce you to the different types or categories of intimate partner violence, and I'm going to discuss the difference between intimate terrorism and situational couple violence, and briefly touch on the incidents. So one of the first things to look at before studying IPV is how to define an intimate partner. Now the CDC, or Centers for Disease Control, at cdc.gov lists 5 different points when defining an intimate partner: emotional connectedness, regular contact, ongoing physical contact and or sexual behavior, familiarity, knowledge about each other's lives, and finally, identity as a couple. While most relationships have a lot of those points, we're just going to focus on couple violence as we look at intimate partner violence. Vicki S. Helgeson wrote a book, The Psychology of Gender, which I read last semester while taking the Psychology of Gender class. She, in her book, she has the Duluth model, which was introduced by E.M. Pence and M. Paynar in 1993. I have made a very oversimplified version of this. In the circle we have power and control, and then we have 8 different categories or types of violence, which I'll cover kind of quickly here. So the first one is intimidation, which is right there. Try to kind of go around the circle here. Making them afraid by using looks, actions, gestures, smashing things, destroying property, abusing pets, and displaying weapons. The second one would be coercion and threats. Making and or carrying out threats to hurt them, threatening to leave them, threatening to commit suicide, threatening to report them to welfare, making them drop charges, and making them do illegal things. The third one is economic abuse, which would include preventing them from getting and keeping a job, making them ask for money, giving them allowance, taking their money, not letting them know or have access to family income. The next one is male and female privilege. The original Duluth model actually only has male privilege, but it's important to remember that both men and women are impacted by abuse. So, treating them like a servant, making big decisions, acting like master or mistress of the castle, and they're the ones who define the roles. Then we have children. Using children as a manipulation tactic, they will make them feel guilty about the children. Using children to relay messages, using visitation to harass them, and threatening to take children away. Now, a lot of the other ones I see personally when I look at some of my friends and their relationships, however, they may not realize that they fall into those categories, and it may not be purposeful, but is certainly not healthy. First one would be emotional abuse. Putting them down, making them feel bad about themselves, calling them names, making them think they're crazy, playing mind games, humiliation, and making them feel guilty. Then we have isolation, controlling who they see, what they do, who they talk to, what they read, where they go, limiting their outside involvement, and here's the real key part that really got me, using jealousy to justify their actions. Then we have minimizing, denying, and blaming, making light of the abuse, and not taking concerns about it seriously, saying the abuse didn't happen, shifting the responsibility for abusive behavior, saying they caused it, When I smacked David earlier and he asked me why I did it, I told him it was his fault. He was the reason that I did it, which it wasn't his fault, it was mine. Now you'll notice that there are a couple points on here that aren't on the Duluth model, which are stalking and rape. If you go to the CDC website or the National Institute of Justice at nij.gov, you'll see those listed. And I think the biggest reason for that is because the Duluth model came out in 1993, and the CDC and NIJ, their websites were updated this year. For example, one thing to note would be in 1993, the marital rape exemption clause was actually deleted from all 50 states, which said that rape was not rape if a husband raped his wife. Now obviously we've come a long way from that, and now we look at sexual violence as the use of physical force to compel someone to do sexual acts with them, whether or not it's completed. An asexual act with someone who cannot understand, whether they're children, whether they're disabled, or whether they're inebriated, and abusive sexual contact. We also look at stalking now as abuse, which also, again, isn't on this. Harassing and threatening behavior that an individual engages in repeatedly, like leaving unwanted presents, following them and lying in wait, damaging or threatening to damage their property, appearing at their home or workplace, and defaming them by spreading rumors about them and posting their personal information online. Now that you have a pretty good understanding of what intimate partner violence is, we'll look at the ways it's used. So the two ways it's used are situational couple violence and intimate terrorism. Intimate terrorism is kind of like a tug of war. You have the person, your perpetrator, that would be the person who abuses you. And they want power and control over their victim. And then on the other hand, you have the victim who retaliates with violent resistance. So it's a very bad combination, very bad tug of war, which obviously I'm losing. But with intimate terrorism often happens quite frequently. The incidence is quite frequent. With situational couple violence, it's more like what happened when I smacked David. If that's a once in a lifetime thing, because say I was stressed about something and I took it out on David, it doesn't mean that it's right. However, most intimate partner violence is situational, and about half of it is an isolated incident that happens once. And so now that we know what intimate partner violence is, how it's used, and why it's used, that power and control that we mentioned earlier, we'll look at the incidents briefly. What I found really interesting when I was doing my research was that about half of intimate partner violence is actually initiated by women. For example, me slapping David. The American Psychological Association confirms that when they say that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men are impacted by abuse. Honestly, we could spend all day talking about intimate partner violence, but we don't have all day. But I wanted you to have a very good general understanding of the topic that affects so many people. So today, I've gone over how to define an intimate partner, what intimate partner violence is, how it's used, and the incidence rate. IPV, also known as domestic violence, is often a taboo subject, but one in which we all need to understand. Although we can make light of me slapping David, intimate partner violence is nothing to joke about. Something that I know all too well.